Hello, everybody. It's great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, founder of GSD, Get You Done Venture Studios, premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team of Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion. Also, Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GSD that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. GST is a unique combination of a family office, a scaler, and a venture studio. With that, I'd like to bring my incredible guest on today. At Top Global Startups, where we highlight founders building the infrastructure of tomorrow. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most exciting and most challenging frontiers in AI, clinical grade voice and agentic systems. Voice AI is rapidly moving beyond the simple copilots into autonomous agents that can engage doctors, patients, and life science teams. But doing this in regulated environments is a completely different game. So I'm thrilled to announce Supreet Deshpande, who's a co-founder and CEO of Synthio. Synthio is a voice and agentic AI platform purpose-built for life sciences, trusted by multiple top 5 global pharma companies to power compliant, always-on AI engagement across medical, commercial, and patient use cases. Backed by Y Combinator, Peak, and Elevation Capital, Supreet brings a rare combination of deep technical expertise and real enterprise experience. Before founding Synthio, he has led generative AI initiatives for life sciences at McKinsey and Company, helping some of the world's largest corporations move AI from experimentation and into production. Today, we'll explore what it really takes to build clinical-grade voice AI, how copilots evolve into autonomous agents, and where this technology is headed next. So with that, I'd like to introduce Supreet. Hi, Supreet.
Hey, Gary. Thanks for that intro.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to have you here. I've got a kind of a mixed bag myself. I have about a year and a half ago, I built a cancer vaccine for my dog at a molecular level. I took her, had her tumor removed. She had kidney cancer. I had her tumor removed, Supreet, and we analyzed at a molecular level. And a company called Ardent Animal Health down in Kentucky actually built the vaccine for me, and we had put my dog in complete remission of stage 4 kidney cancer.
Wow.
So, and then for myself, I put the AI, my multi-agent LLMs on myself, and it went down through, and I had stage 3 kidney disease, and it went down through, and I had 100 million mesenchymal stem cells put in me twice, and it went down through and completely cured my kidney disease, and my biological age went down 20 years.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. It's so I hear what you're saying. I've been in AI for about 30 years, so know about it, and I applaud what you're doing. So let's start at the beginning. What did you see in life sciences that convinced you voice and agentic AI needed a completely different approach?
Yeah, no, happy to. I think mine is a little unconventional in the sense I didn't kind of miraculously land on this. The last decade for me has been in the life sciences space. At McKinsey, I predominantly worked with all of the large life sciences companies, and before that, I was at another boutique consulting firm called ZS, which also traditionally works with pharma cos. So I think over the last decade, I've probably spent time with 30 of the top 50 pharma cos, and I think it was very clear that beyond just making amazing medicines, which I think we all know pharma companies are doing a good job of just bringing new drugs to market, it's equally important to be able to reach and support the end stakeholders, in this case, physicians and patients that are going to use these medicines. And I think pharma is one of those very traditional industries where the go-to-market model has always been, boots on ground, reps kind of going and meeting physicians. So I think that's kind of where this made a lot of sense. And personally, I spend a lot of time kind of talking to patients within oncology space, neurology, where there's just a massive need of, hey, I try to reach my payer, my hospital, I don't know who to call onto for my.
That's the biggest problem, right?
Yeah.
So I went down. So my wife had stage 2A cancer, breast cancer, triple negative,
Hmm.
right? And I went down through it myself, and
Yeah.
then I had it happen to me when I was out at Stanford. I went out to Stanford. I had a
Hmm.
problems with my pancreas, and and if you don't have an advocate or somebody to talk to, you don't know what's going on because they're
Absolutely.
it's really crazy. You would think that the situation, I mean, you could die, but you may
Yeah.
never be seen.
100%. I think on top of that, add to it all the clinical trials that are going on. So you go to a particular hospital, like you mentioned Stanford, and they say, "Hey, there are these three trials, right?" And I think now at least it's getting better with the perplexities of the world. You can kind of look for it, but in general, information awareness. Is just been so difficult. And then also the level, right? Like you can't expect patients to go on a clinicaltrials.gov and navigate that clunky website to find out what's the right kind of option for them. So yeah, so I hear you. I think it's a big pain point.
It's and I call it medical infobesity. So I've
Yeah.
read about 800 articles, and I went down through it myself using my multi-agent large language models when I
Mhm.
had stage 3 kidney disease. It was really concerning because you get past stage 4 and you're going on dialysis. This is not a game, right? This is not something you play around with. And so what happened is what I understood is that if I didn't do something and make a change and a radical change, there's one thing about diet, there's one thing about ibuprofen or taking
Yeah.
those kind of things. But I, you didn't have anybody to talk to. One of the things with agentic AI now is it gives you a voice to talk to. You may not get to a doctor,
Yes.
but if you can find somebody that can help you live, what is it worth?
Absolutely. No, I think you're spot on, Gary, and it kind of extends beyond that, right? I think the one thing that if you think about the broader paradigm change that's happening in the life sciences space, right? Like think about the GLP-1s of the world, right? Like the semaglutides, the Ozempics of the world. Your patient population is going to be in millions, right? And your physician population now is pretty much every primary care physician. That's over 300,000 physicians. So you can't realistically have a large enough field team that can support your go to market efforts on the physician side, or like have a call center that can handle all of these patient calls. So I think it sort of becomes even more important today to be able to just have seamless customer service. I think the kind of the trickle down, the version of what we're trying to do is, hey, I think it's time now for pharma to have consumer grade customer experience and engagement like we expect from Apple or Amazon or any of these of our favorite brands, because this today is life or death type of products. And I'm okay if my Amazon product doesn't reaches me in a day, but it's not the same with my drug.
I'm going to do my keynote up in San Francisco next week at the Health Tech Summit, and I'm going to be talking about stem cells because it's another crazy thing.
Hmm.
Right? Now, think about it. You have these stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, are undifferentiated and go to any area of your body that has damage and replace those cells with new cells. What's it worth? You know what I mean? What's it worth if you have Alzheimer's or dementia? What's it worth if you have kidney disease?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. And we don't like, what you're doing, Supreet, is really interesting because the knowledge is the power to live. There's not a lot, you look at it, listen, when you're 6 foot under, it doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think absolutely hear you. I think there's just so much happening in the space. There's just in general, right? Like if you think about pipelines, I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. So we were very close to UCSF here a couple months back. So, I would often kind of just hang out in the canteen there to see if I could, get hold of a physician. So we would often, be in the oncology department cafeteria, and then one of the physicians I ended up speaking to there said this, right, in terms of typical workflow, because my question was, hey, how do you get your information about drugs today, right? Like, and do you go to a chat gpt? I think there's open evidence now, which is essentially a chat gpt for physicians. I think OpenAI announced their own version of it. And then my question was, now that you have all of this, right, like what are the kind of scenarios or use cases you'd want to go to a pharma like a Pfizer or an AstraZeneca, right? Like to kind of get your questions answered. And I think what they said was really interesting. And they said, I have a patient coming in for colonoscopy in a week, and they're on Ozempic today, and I need to understand what do I do with their Ozempic dosage. So that's a very genuine question I have. So I went to ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT what I should do. It gave me a decent answer. It kind of validated what I already knew. I then went on to a few other kind of LLM models that are out there, and I got similar responses. But the challenge, Supreet, is that I really cannot act just based on any of those responses. I need a credible, trusted source because this is a patient's life we are talking about. So I did the next obvious thing, which is I called my pharmacist. So I have my pharmacist on my speed dial. So I called them and said, hey, I have this question. And then the pharmacist went to the Novo Nordisk website and Novo Nordisk manufacturer, Ozempic, and they then kind of put the information request there. It took 2 to 3 days for the information to come back from the drug manufacturer. They then created a 2-pager slide report and gave it to me. And now I could credibly act on it because it came with a seal of approval from.
Stage more of a disease. You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
what you go down through. Here's the thing. Here's another thing, Supreet. It's really another part of the model, right? If you go down through it, if you have a concierge doctor, which I've had and have had two at a time, and you go in, what they do is they run you through the system. Hey, my Gary, one of my patients is here. Let me have you come down. I want you. I was traveling to Europe, and I was afraid I had some problem with my urethra. Right, I
Mhm.
went down through, and then I wanted to make sure it wasn't a prostate problem. The guy scoped me out. He did the whole thing right on the spot. He
Mhm.
literally, I went down to his office. He did it that day. Seriously. And I was like, this is crazy. What would have taken me? The guy has like a 3 to 4 month lead time to get in to see him, and he does me right on the spot. And then and I'm like, this is nuts. You could die, or go, you could have stage one and go to stage three, and all of a sudden you can't
Yeah.
do anything about it. So what you're doing is it reducing the time. But I think the other thing, Supreet, is really important, and I read
Mhm.
a lot about this personally, probably 100 articles about it, is that we need to have this integrated approach. The Aristotle said the sum of the parts equal the whole. It's not just what that is; it's the entire integrated. And I'm sure you're talking about it, right? And creating an omni-channel experience.
Yeah.
So the patient comes in and it's everything, so you don't die. Who's
Yeah.
the doctor? Who's got the best house sprays? Who's an expert in this kind of cancer? Who's the person that's got the availability? Do they have an appointment available? This integrated approach, and I don't know about what you think about it, but for me, it's like going to happen. It's not, if, it's when.
You're right, Gary. I think there are two different worlds, right? And in fact, there are probably three. So one is the hospital systems. The second is all the payers, right, and the insurance kind of players. And the third, I would say, is the pharma. So we are kind of more focused on the pharmaceutical industry. But I think across each one of these, there needs to be this integrated kind of systems. To your point, in the hospital side of the world, it needs to be, hey, I need to understand which patient, when are they coming in, kind of what's their history. Even for a physician, ideally, when they go into the EHR, they have all of the history about the patient. And then you have smart AI tools that help with clinical decision support at the point of care so that they then don't have to kind of go to multiple tools. And the same thing from a pharma industry, right? Like if you think about someone that's manufacturing kind of drugs and making sure they reach to the right patients and the right physicians are aware that, hey, there is a better treatment that exists and, hey, this is something that's been through clinical trial. I think at least the table stakes at this point with where AI is to make sure that if any patient or a physician wants to get some answers about a particular treatment or a regimen they're on, they should be able to get that in real time. It's almost like on demand so that they don't have to wait. Right, like a patient's case is like trying to call a nurse support hub, and they're constantly spending like 20-30 minutes trying to get to human on the other side, and it's telling press 1 for this, press 2 for this, which is quite annoying. And the same thing with physicians where they don't have time to wait for reps to show up. Oftentimes, I think the other thing that we've heard a lot from our interviews with physicians is, hey, we have a lot of pharma reps come to us, and specifically in complex therapeutic areas like oncology, right? It's like they probably don't have the answers to the questions I have. So I then just kind of get connected to someone else internally, and it's almost like passing the ball, and it takes,
But that's the way it is in the medical system.
yeah,
It's the ball. It's like, I mean, try to go down through and I can tell you story after story where I've had personally have been in that situation,
yeah,
right? And you got the ball passed, but the problem, I had a situation, real situation occur myself with an insurer. So my insurance that I had was a Florida-based insurance. So I had a special policy cover me 100% as long as I'm in Florida. If I was out of Florida, it's on emergency basis. Well, I was in another state. I ended up having a problem, right? I go down through and I go into an emergency room, right? It was life threatening. I go into the emergency room. They put me into the hospital. This is on a Thursday. On Sunday, and that particular hospital, I happen to know I know one of the board of trustees of that hospital, board of directors, and I also happened to he also was friends with the head of the health system. Well, guess what happened? So I nobody did anything with me. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I'm sitting in the hospital. I said, this place has cost more than the freaking presidential suite in Maui. I said, I guarantee it. The Jello probably cost me $200, right? But what happened is I made a phone call to my friend who called up the head of that particular institution. All of a sudden, the chief of surgery comes into my, and this is a very famous hospital, comes into my room with one of the fellows, and all of a sudden I had concierge service right on the spot. They got me in. Then they said I had a bill. It was $470,000, and they said my insurance wasn't going to cover it. Would I like to pay for it? And they'll give me a 20% discount. And I'm like, and so then I had to again call the fellow who called to the director of surgery, and that person at that particular insurance company, the guy graduated from Stanford, from a university where this guy went to, and they knew each other. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, it was not a problem. But what about the poor person that can't do those kind of things?
absolutely. No, I think we are seeing some of those things on like the fundamental infrastructure of it change. For example, like a lot of the tailwinds around direct to patient, right? So we are already seeing, I think Lilly announced a Lilly direct program, and I think there are a few other pharma.
I see it coming more, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are a few other pharmacos that are following suite where they're just like, hey, we'll directly go to patients, right? And then if you have like drugs in your pipeline that are gonna be used by millions of people, like the GLP-1s, right? Like you'd probably be better off just going direct to patients in that case. So I think that's going to.
But it's not the GLP-1s, Supreet. It's
Mhm.
getting GLP-3s,
Yeah,
getting retatrutide, and those kind of things. And they're, instead of staying in line with GLP-1s, why not go? You know what I mean? I'm taking GLP-3s.
yeah. No, you're right. I think there's just a start. It's almost like the
But we got to do it. It's like companies like yours. Here's the problem, right? Companies like yours, and I'm going to be talking. I just was in Africa talking about this. So I
Mhm.
was in Nigeria. Companies like yours, you're like a Ferrari in the garage. You got to get the Ferrari out so people know about it. And the problem is not a lot of people understand the problem. How dynamically awful it is.
Yeah, yeah. I think I think there are three different things I would say. So one is, to your point, the awareness of it. So I think that just needs to happen. But I think the second part, which I see parts of it, is also the complexity and the compliance and the regulations in the industry, right? So oftentimes there is intent across everyone in the C-suite and the boardroom to completely reimagine and have a right, like a new model for go to market, but then there are just challenges around, a, what will legal say about this, or what will compliance say about it. So I think a large part of our effort has been to kind of make sure everything that we've built is very specifically kind of tuned for pharma, keeping all of the compliance, regulatory, FDA rules and the hurdles in mind. So that's another piece, I think, like, which you not see across other industries, which is we don't sell to hospital systems, we don't sell to insurance payers, we are very specific to pharma, because while these are sort of the three players in the space, each one of them is its own 800-pound gorilla, right, if you will. So I think that becomes even more increasingly important. So I think that helps. And the third thing I would say, Gary, is biotechs, right? So I think increasingly what I'm seeing, I spend a lot of time talking to CEOs of biotechs here in the Bay Area. They're like, look, the only reason I was right, like if I have a phase 3 asset, uh, you know, over the last decade, I've been told that you need a certain $1 million to just commercialize it yourself, right? Because you need a massive sales team and you need the entire commercial engine. And so that's why I want to go through an M&A. But if AI can just help me have a super lean commercial model, I might as well bring it to market myself.
That's it. And that's going to happen everywhere, right?
Exactly. So I think that's the other kind of interesting angle in here, where a lot of the biotechs that have promising assets in like a phase 3, they'll probably try to bring it to market themselves and have a completely kind of AI native way of going to market, because they don't have the baggage of trying to like refix things with
No, and they want to
things
get
do.
out because you're going to, the people that don't do it, I had um, I remember when at the beginning of COVID, I was asked to be on a panel, and they were talking about uh, the COVID vaccines coming
Yeah.
out, and they needed to speed it up, right? And they asked me. I was the only one that had an AI background that was on this particular panel
Mhm.
internationally, and I'm like, they're all doctors or MDs and PhDs, or MDs and PhDs and another PhD and an MBA. It was crazy, actually. And they asked me, and I said, well, it's pretty simple to me. I said, why don't you use these tools to be able to assist you in doing drug discovery?
Yeah.
And before anybody was talking about it, I said, if I was you, I'd be doing it right now, because the person who harnesses this is going to be able to come to market a lot faster, and you're going to create an ecosystem that's so different. Imagine being able to get out through and do testing in an entirely different way, right? And
Yeah.
so bringing out to market. So the first company that does that and uses an integrated approach with what you have with tied into the physicians, right? Because the physicians need to
Yeah.
approve. All of a sudden, you come to market a lot faster and people live.
Absolutely, Gary. I'm glad you mentioned that, because, I was talking to a few other fellow founders, right, like YC founders and alums. So there was this one company that started off as building software for pharma R&D teams to just help with better drug discovery. So that's kind of how they started off. But then after spending a year into navigating, the procurement process and just the compliance hurdles that exist, they then decided, hey, like, screw this, we'll just like bring our own drugs and put them in trial. So they moved from being a software to help R&D teams with better drug discovery. They're like, we'll use our software, we'll do the drug discovery and just put it in trials. So now
Yeah.
they are a pharma company with a couple assets in phase 2 and phase 3, which a few years back was a software company. And I think that's just increasingly going to happen to now, when they then combine with the type of products we have, where we are kind of helping with the go to market engine of it. You then have an entirely AI enabled way of almost a new way of what a pharma company could look like.
No, and it's an integrated approach. It's not going to be
Yeah.
just pharma. Supreet. Remember,
Yeah.
we gotta talk about integrated approaches, because the doctors are overwhelmed too. I'm doing
Right.
retrotrutide, which is which is compounded. And the situation is, why not use these frontier medicines? I did with my dog, right? They said I could
Mhm.
never build a cancer vaccine for my dog. And I love my little dog. I don't want my dog to die. And so I sat down. I'm not a smart guy like you. I'm just a country boy, grew up on a farm. But I sat down and used the 14 large language models as a team. Why, by the way, that's another approach. If you use a multi-agent LLM, which I've been using for 3.5 years, to be able to solve things, it becomes a think tank. And
Yeah.
then you take the one of the LLMs, Claude at the time was 1,000 times faster than ChatGPT at doing mathematical calculations. Then
Mhm.
they gave themselves each jobs, and all of a sudden things change. It's going to happen. Like I said, the Germans called the sum of the parts equal the whole, and so did Aristotle, right? But we got to go down through and take that approach, and it needs to be now. And it's going to be for everything. It's not going to be just for this, by the way. There's going to be one agent
Yeah.
that be like your grandmother. And this is what I've been writing, empathy and compassion, that's
Yeah.
going to love you and care about you seriously for everything. And it's going to have unconditional. I wrote this paper. I said, if we tokenize goodness, which I've already done, right, in a
Yeah.
model, and then I added Carl Rogers' Rogerian unconditional positive regard, a humanistic psychology. This model is like your grandmother, it loves you and
Yeah.
it's empathetic. That's the kind of model that'll be able to serve all of us. And it's
Yeah.
going to happen. You're going to have one, it'll be like your cobot in this sense, because it's going to be able to help you and it'll be, care. Hey, listen, you need to get your sleep, Supreet. I know you've been working hard tonight, but listen, I checked your monitor and, your Fitbit and your Fitbit, you're tired out. Why don't you go in, relax a little bit. And then tomorrow, let's get up and let's hit the gym.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, yeah, we spend a lot of time with colleges as well. So one of the things that we've done when in our voice AI systems, Gary, is, and you'll appreciate this, is I think they call it the OCEAN framework for humans. So it's openness, extrovertedness, right? Like neuroticism. So kind of all of those come, which essentially makes us who we are. It's almost like the MBTI equivalent. So kind of adding those into the persona. So it's almost like having an empathetic nurse. So in fact, we did a real world study where we had over 1,000 registered US nurses that spoke to our AI nurse. And then we told them, hey, like, why don't you guys role play a patient and just see how good the nurse does? Because you're all registered nurses, so you should be able to kind of evaluate it. And they evaluated it over like on 12 plus metrics on efficacy, accuracy, empathy, emotion, and a bunch of other things. Uh,
Compassion. We got compassion.
yeah, so all of those things, and we actually published it as a research paper on medRxiv, which I think is one of the very few real world studies where it's you have these real world nurses that speak to an AI nurse and they tell how good it is, and a lot of them, quite honestly, they were just mind blown. They were like, "This is too good." It's very empathetic. I would have oftentimes I've had patients where after 28, 29 minutes I'm losing my patience, but AI is going to very patiently talk to you. If you're a 70-year-old and you want to spend 90 minutes on a call talking to a nurse, you can have an AI nurse do that.
Yeah, but Viktor Frankl, right? Man's first search for meaning,
Yeah.
and that I was a clinical psychologist at one point, so I know a little bit about it, right?
Oh,
And so it's interesting, but that model, I like where you're going with it, but again, you know, it's um, it's like having a Ferrari in the garage and people don't know about it. And that's the problem. That's one of the biggest problems with startups. I personally have done 17 startups and a couple of unicorns. I've been
yeah.
involved in thousands of them. I have 180 in my portfolio today. And the biggest problem is storytelling, right? And to make it so powerful that people want to grab it out of your hands. Magic. The magic part of the storytelling is the difference. And when you start, in fact, when I just wrote a book. It's coming out on Amazon next week on Wednesday on my stem cell journey. Guess
Mm.
what? I'm only one of 700 people in the world that's done 2 full body stem cell replacements. Right? What does
Wow.
that mean? It means you can change your life.
Hmm.
Change your life. So it's not just giving drugs, but imagine going back 20 years in time. Biologically, you're 20 years younger. What's that worth to you?
Yeah.
You know, in the whole scale of things. Guess what? You don't get such age-related diseases anymore.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think I was just curious on what your take is around the whole age reversal, because I know there's sort of two different camps around it, right? But I do think, like, even with things like CRISPR and gene editing, I think that's another thing that's just going to kind of keep picking up.
Oh, I mean, I'm living proof.
Yeah.
Done mesenchymal stem cells from the umbilical cord 3 hours after somebody delivered. I had them. So
Hmm.
cognitively, I didn't bench it going into it, but I think I'm 15 to 20% better than I was going in. Uh, all the wrinkles went out of my face. Everything started changing, actually. And my stage 3 kidney disease within a week was completely gone. I was back to normal.
Wow.
What's that worth? There were people with stroke, Alzheimer's, dementia there, Parkinson's disease. I saw a guy that had supranuclear cerebral palsy walk up steps. I saw him do it. I saw him come in when he first came the first day. And then
Hmm.
I saw him 3 days later. I saw him get up and his hands have been, I don't know if you know palsy, but it completely stopped shaking.
Wow.
What's it worth? I don't
Yeah.
know. That's the thing. We've got to have an integrated approach. And, what you're doing, these frontier sciences, this is a frontier. I was at Mar-Lago. So I had
Hmm.
Mar-Lago and I was with one of the senators and I asked him and I said, why can't we use mesenchymal stem cells from an umbilical cord here? He said, because there are people that were very religious that came in and said, essentially was playing God during the Bush administration. And
Mm.
so lobbied Congress and they got to put it. Well, why? It's medical waste. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People, why not do it to be able to help people live longer? If you can help one person, it's a father or a mother, and you can help them with their kidney disease or dementia. What's it worth to have your mom for another 10 years to talk to her?
Yeah.
Right? It's crazy.
Absolutely.
And so you got to bring the beauty. I remember I took that course at Stanford. I took a continuing ed course one time, and it was on storytelling. Right, the storytelling is the most powerful thing that very few people have the ability to be able to master. Storytelling, painting pictures with words, critically important.
Couldn't agree more there with you. Uh, I remember, I think during my McKinsey days, when one of the partners told me, they're saying, at the end of the day, you're just dealing with humans, and humans are emotional beings, right? So all you need to kind of just make sure is you're able to connect with them at a very emotional level. And I think the
Exactly.
one thing over the last 100,000 years of human evolution has been true is that humans love stories. From the cave painting times to now, there's reason why epics have kind of somehow sustained for hundreds of thousands of years, because and I think Yuval talks about it in Sapiens, right? The only thing that kind of differs Homo sapiens to every other species is our ability to tell stories. So I'm a big believer. So
Well, 90% of building unicorns is storytelling. I can tell you that because I've done it.
yeah.
And so, and my peer group has done it many, many times. And I hear it, on and on and on. I remember when Steve Jobs first got started and,
Hmm.
um, and, he was awful at it actually. In fact, if
Hmm.
you look at it, some of the early videos, you can see him throwing up. And uh, I know a lot of those folks, right? Because I was around at that time. And it was amazing how the storytelling evolved and all of a sudden it changed everything. Everything. And so, but what you're doing is something that's actually the difference between life and I went through it with my dad, Supreet. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? My dad had a stroke, right? And he said he was going to die within a week. And I'm like, I mean, I was shocked. And so I was out in California. I flew back to the East Coast. I met with my father and I went into his room. I'll never forget this. And I'm a psychologist. And I remember hope's the most important thing when you're in a life threatening situation.
Hmm.
I said to my father, um, I said, Dad, I'll get you a basset hound. I'll get you a basset hound as soon as you recover. And he said, you promise? And he hadn't spoken for a couple of days. And I said, yeah, absolutely. He said, I want a brown and white female, right? And I bought that basset hound. And my father, within 2.5 months, walked and talked again. They said he would never walk and talk again. So pretty never.
Wow.
He walked and talked. And I went down through and I understood love is the most important thing, right? And so what you're building inside of your model, and I'm relating this back to your story, is love and compassion and empathy are critically important because when it's all said and done, if somebody cares about you, you care more about them.
Absolutely. No, you're spot on, Gary, with that. And I think it extends beyond just patients as well, because so some of the voice applications we have are even used by field teams, right? So today, if you're a field team and you're kind of going out talking to physicians, so you can just, and we call it Jarvis, shamelessly took it from what it meant in Iron Man, right? But essentially, hey Jarvis, who am I meeting next? Who are my top customers? And now, after having spent a couple months with it, like we now have people kind of just being so emotionally connected with it, and they're like, oh, it didn't fumble this physician's name, oh, she didn't fumble on this, and it's almost like they've personified it, and there's an emotional connect with it, which is just so hard to explain.
People
But
want that. They want that emotional connection, right?
yeah, yeah. And like these are use cases where it's not a nurse trying to do patient engagement. This is very kind of, call it corporative, where it's a field team, a sales team, go to market team, using it to identify the next targets, next customers. Hey, like, what should I do for the day? But they've somehow built that as a connection over time, which we never thought would happen. But I think it again goes back to this other thing around voice, which I think, so we've been spending a lot of time on voice. So I was doing and I'm a history buff, so I was just reading up a bit, and I'm sure you'll find this interesting, which is our ability as humans to write has just, I think, evolved over the last few thousands of years, because
Yeah,
there was no writing that
like
existed.
10,000 years with cuneiform.
Yeah, and so we are a more kind of intuitively a species that understands voice better, and we are kind of tuned to speaking and listening for a lot longer time than we've been writing. And so keyboards, typing, all of that is a very new kind of invention for our brain. But I think that's why we are seeing voice kind of picking up so quickly, because it's kind of taking us back to 100,000 years of evolution, where we have tuned our brain to be able to just have voice as an interface, which makes a lot more sense. And so I think that's why we are also more bullish on voice, where I think we'll reach a time where I think keyboards will be obsolete, right? You probably are not going to
Yeah,
type.
no, it's already started. The
Yeah,
transition is taking place, and then, of course, Neuralink and some of the other the
yeah,
tools are going to be out there. No, I
absolutely.
got it. Listen, if you want to stay on after the show, I love our conversation, and we can talk some more about it.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyhow, closing thoughts and how to be people get a hold of you, Supreet.
Yeah. So again, like, we are expanding quite rapidly. Just check us out on synthiolabs.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. We've already partnered with a couple of the large pharma cos already, and kind of doing some really cool things. So would love to find a way to work.
Sounds great. And what's the best way to get a hold of you? LinkedIn, Facebook,
I think
what?
LinkedIn is perfect, or just fill a form on our website. We'll have someone from our team reach out to you either way. So website and LinkedIn are probably the best ones.
All right, sounds great. Well, thanks for taking time out of your
Thank
busy.
you, Gary. It was wonderful. Yeah, wonderful meeting.
Yeah, same here. And thanks to all of you for joining one more time. GSD Presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. And I'll be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. And check out our YouTube channel and make sure you like. Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Supreet. I'll be back in a minute.